Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing all right. This is our Friday morning legal questions and answers uh, series, and Michael DiRienzo's our host, and this is Chris Maher, and it's good to be back on a Friday morning, Michael. Thank you.
That it is. So today we're going to talk about something that, unfortunately, a lot of people are very intimate about, but really don't understand the consequences about, which is traffic tickets. So, for instance, you're driving down the road, you think you're doing 40 in a 45, but it ends up that it turned into a 30, or you dropped into a school zone and nails you, gives you a ticket. Uh, what do you recommend? Do we just pay it and move on, or what?
I again recommend what you and I always talk about, Michael, which is that it doesn't cost somebody anything to call up a local attorney who is skilled or versed in that area of the law and to ask that lawyer. I've been given some tickets by a member of law enforcement, and what do I do? And I tell people that it happens all the time. Uh, and you and I have recently dealt with a series of these situations involving clients. The client doesn't realize that uh, he or she has been given a ticket for something more serious than a uh, parking in front of a hydrant or uh, having a busted tail light. It's something that can cause you to have points on your license, or as very often happens, the client finds out by being stopped by a member of law enforcement in New York that the client's license has been suspended for something. And it can be something that the client will tell us, I don't even remember where I got tickets that would have caused my license to be suspended. And if it's gotten to that level, very often the client will have been charged with a misdemeanor violation of the vehicle and traffic law. And it could be something worse than a misdemeanor. But for purposes of our discussion today, the client is stopped and realizes a day late and a dollar short, so to speak, that they have been now charged with what New York refers to as an aggravated unlicensed operation of a motor vehicle charge, and that can be a misdemeanor. The client doesn't realize because the client just had some interaction with a member of law enforcement. And we always say that it's not a time to get snippy or rude or nasty. It's just a time to cooperate and provide that member of law enforcement with a license. And if they're asking for a registration and an insurance card, to have those documents at ready reference to give them. But the client is then sent on their way, and the client thinks it's no big deal. And there are vast areas in the state of New York, primarily in the more rural areas, where the district attorney's office in that county will be prosecuting those tickets. So the client is recommended not to deal with those tickets on their own, that they should get an attorney to represent them, because there's an attorney representing the district attorney in that county where they have been stopped. And they are not expecting or should not expect that member of a district attorney's office is going to cut them any breaks or do any favors for them, simply because they seem to be very nice, and they're not, apparently at least, giving them a hard time about working out a resolution. There are point systems that we have in New York, and there are point systems that people are generally familiar with. And so we will really just deal with those this morning. But um, if you think that you are going to have points on your license, those points can have an adverse impact on your ability to even get car insurance. And if you have been charged with a misdemeanor offense of aggravated unlicensed operation of a motor vehicle, and the member of law enforcement tells you that your license has been suspended, the first thing that you ought to do is you ought to, after speaking with someone such as us, you ought to go on to the DMV website and get a printout of what your driving abstract shows, so you can find out where you may have forgotten. And it's happened to all of us because we're all very busy and life tends to get chaotic and in the way, that you find out where it is, what town or village or city, and it can be New York City, that you have gotten tickets in. And you've already found out the hard way that your license has been suspended because most people forget to answer the ticket, or if they get something, especially with the pandemic, they get notices from these courts. People are forgetting that they have to answer those notices. They're not just going to go away. We've had revisions of the laws in New York that in the old days would cause the motorist license to be suspended, but you cannot rely on those revisions to keep you safe from having your license suspended, because you've just found out, especially if you got stopped by a member of law enforcement and were issued tickets and were told that your license is suspended, the first order of business is to find out what the suspensions were for. And even if it's in New York City, you have to take steps to undo those suspensions. And those very often require you, or if you're going to enlist the services of an attorney, the attorney to contact that court and can you hear me?
Yep, we can still hear you, Chris.
Okay. You or that lawyer to contact the court and to make reference to whatever the ticket number was or the case number was from that court where you forgot that you had to go, or you got a notice and lost it during the pandemic, or whatever other reason you have, and you've got to undo the suspension for failing to appear in that court, or worse than that, failing to answer the ticket in the first instance. And very often that requires you to pay a fine and get a document that we refer to in the courts in this area of the state as a lift fee, and a document that will reflect that you've paid a lift fee, which is something that you should keep in your car, because if you do get stopped again before you can rectify these suspensions, you need to be able to show whoever stops you again that you have not an active suspension from that court, because some police officers and members of law enforcement, state troopers, NYPD, sheriff's deputies, they may decide that they need to or want to take you to their police station or trooper barracks or sheriff's department, or precinct if you're in the NYPD, and they may want to process you, which is something that I've never had anybody tell us is a pleasant experience. And in fact, it can cause things like your car to be towed from the side of the road, and then you have to go through that process, which again, I've never heard anybody say was a pleasant process, because very often you have to find your car. You have to find out, much to your chagrin, that you are paying steep towing and impound fees to a lot somewhere that may be in the back end of some community where they're not available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And suddenly you're Ubering from a police precinct or some sheriff's department or state trooper barracks back to your car, where you're finding out that it's 4 o'clock in the morning and your car is going to be locked up till they open at 5 hours later than you've arrived there. So then you have to choose to Uber you and potentially whoever was in the car with you. But uh, the best way to avoid that is to keep the lift documents. If you've gotten the suspension for failure to appear lifted, you carry that document with you for some period of time in your motor vehicle, so that a police officer or a member of law enforcement is less likely to want to take you in because you say to them, well, I got something that showed that I got that suspension lifted, so you can't take me in. It's a hard task and a hard argument to win at 4 o'clock in the morning when you've been stopped and issued these tickets. And if the tickets indicate that you're still suspended, the member of law enforcement is far more likely to rely on his or her computer than whatever you're telling them you left back in your office or your dwelling that's going to support your argument. So the the best advice is to have those tickets. Take very good care of those tickets. Don't crumple them up and throw them on the floor because you're upset about it, or throw them away, God forbid, and lose your copy of whatever the charges are that the law enforcement representative is going to give to a prosecutor, who will be an attorney whose job it is to prosecute those tickets. And whether it's a district attorney from some county further upstate, or it's a local court traffic prosecutor from this neck of the woods, we'll call it, they don't throw them away. And their processes are to prosecute those tickets, whether you're there or not, or whether you have sent in some type of a document reflecting that you are appearing and are going to test those charges. So until you've spoken to an experienced attorney, don't just assume that it's like a parking ticket in the old days that you got because you went to a parking garage in some city like White Plains and they gave you a parking ticket. It's not. And the old days of parking tickets causing you to have your license suspended, perhaps, those were the old days. Now everything is by computer. They don't forget anything. And you need to close it out with an appearance by yourself, either by letter or in person. And if it says on a ticket that you get that you have to answer the ticket by a certain date, don't assume that you have to go to court. You can very often do it by answering electronically or by the mail, but you need to respond to that ticket and you need to know where your license was suspended out of. And people very often, countless times, say to us, geez, I didn't remember that I got a ticket from that place. And the reason they didn't remember was life gets in the way, you know? So we'll pick this up in future sessions of this series, but the first order of business is to get on the phone with somebody who is skilled and experienced and does this for a living, and to ask them, when you have the tickets with you, what do you think I should do? And when we refer them to that part of their ticket, they can tell us what court they're in and what the level of the charges are. because we've obviously been there countless times over the years with clients, and we can tell them, A, whether you need a lawyer, B, what the outcome could potentially be if you have a lawyer or don't have a lawyer, and bring it to a successful conclusion. People are, as we always say, Michael, welcome to call the phone number that appears at the bottom of the screen, or to call any lawyer who is versed in that area of the law and can tell you what they think you need to do. And so call us anytime, and we'll be happy to speak to you free of charge.
All right. All right. Thank you, Chris,
Thank you,
for that
Michael.
great introduction. We're going to pick it up next week about some of the more specifics. I know points is something that a lot of people don't understand, but everybody knows about. So I think that'll be a great thing to kind of learn more about. So we'll talk about the point system in New York for traffic tickets and insurance next week. Have a
Very
good
good.
week.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.